My name is Mimi Nyaba, and I'm a food researcher from the African Center for Cities. In this video, I will be reflecting on the story Feeding Nosipho. The first time I saw the video Feeding Nosipho was in a food dialogue workshop in Nyanga, where I was one of the chairs. As a chair, I had to engage different groups on their initial reactions to the video, and from that point, facilitate a dialogue from which you give overall feedback with the rest of the participants in the workshop. The reactions to the video differed in the lived experiences of the individuals in the groups. The one group with a largely student and academic background's reactions was shaped around the systematic effect of diet, with affordability and access being a constant drawback in the South African context. The second group was largely presented by women of different ages from Nyanga in the informal settlement that was located not too far from the workshop venue. In my initial feedback of the discussions to the first group, the women were not engaged. Their body language was reserved. They were not interested in the academic point of view. Their reactions showed a completely different lived experience where they reflected a much larger question of the safety of Nosipho, who's growing up in Nyanga. That is because of the environment in which Nosipho lives and plays in. The concern for feeding Nosipho was in friction with the danger to her safety as a result of lack of services such as electricity and sewage. These two juxtaposition perspectives from the video support this argument that when research is brought closer to the lives of communities who are most affected by food insecurity and other lack of basic services, the intersections overlap in such a way that the policy level response must reflect the same overlap. So why is participatory action research an important way to understand how people access food in cities? Participatory research requires the building of a trusted relationship between the researcher and the participants. By taking part in the co-creation and co-analysis of the data with the researcher, the participants have more agency in shaping the research outcomes. Their insights and lived experiences become a form of expertise in understanding the problem. In the instance of the video then, it is demonstrated how the different systems outside of the food system shape the types of food that people eat in a particular community. For example, the time it takes for Nosipho's mother to travel home and whether or not they have access to electricity shapes what meal they prefer for supper. This is an example towards the instant porridge, for example. And going to the storytelling aspect of the video. Storytelling is one way of bringing the research closer to the ones most affected by it. By showing the story behind the numbers, data becomes more accessible to those affected by it. And this is important that storytelling reflects the people who are affected by the issues. And it also brings it closer to those who have not been in the shoes of those most affected by this. An example of this is the question of diet, time, and affordability. This is one factor in food security which is often blanketed in eat a healthy diet and can often ignore the factors which constitute what a healthy diet means in practice. This means to consider that preparing something is an energy-intensive activity, and that at the same time, there's a cost-benefit analysis that you're making at the moment. Cooking something is also a time consideration because you have to get from where you source the food to your house and you have to make it. And the reason you have to factor in so much time is because you're making multiple rounds of food. So if you can situate someone who doesn't have the lived experience to understand the context and understand why food then becomes a policy consideration. In understanding that food choices are affected by the environment and buying power, it becomes more about creating an enabling environment for healthy food choices to be made. This is where the city falls short because they'll say, but we're running these education programs while people are still eating noodles. But that's not the whole story. What this research process has shown is that the urban food story is far more nuanced than many may think. Not everyone is able to jump into a car and go to the supermarket when they need ingredients for a meal. It is very important for all of us, from communities to policymakers to city officials, the private sector actors, and academics, to acknowledge this so that we can become more proactive about creating conducive conditions for mothers in informal settlements so that they can be better positioned to provide for not only their nutritional needs, but for the needs of their children and households more generally.